It's my honor to be able to introduce them to you. I'm going to introduce all four of them briefly, and then they will speak in turn in the order in which I'm introducing them. Our first speaker will be Kim Gasper-Rabeck, who is a member of Socialist Horizon, who is located here in the US, in Wisconsin. Our second speaker will be James Raddick, who's a member of the Firebrand Communist Group, and he is located in Denver, Colorado. Our third speaker will be Alejandro, who is our Argentinian comrade from the International League of Socialists, with whom we have been having really, really incredible conversations about the need to build a revolutionary organization, and particularly the need to bring people from uh, groups like ours together into one fighting force. So Alejandro will speak third. And then finally, Jordan, our comrade from the Socialist Alternative organization in Australia, will speak fourth. James Raddick from Denver Communist.
Hi, greetings everyone. I'm James with Firebrand and the Denver Communists. We're about coming up on 3 years old, I think, at the end of this year. We have branches in Seattle and New York and Boston, as well as at-large members scattered across the country. We're formed by branches that stayed together after the ISO dissolved in 2019. So I'm really honored to speak alongside comrades from the MST, Socialist Alternative, and Socialist Horizon. And thanks to all who came to listen, speak, and discuss and try to grind out this problem together. And thanks to Socialist Horizon comrades for putting this together and for getting us involved. So crisis and cruelty are inevitable under capitalism. Resistance to them is also inevitable, but the success of that resistance is contingent on the ideas and practices taken up by it. Revolutionary organization is meant to develop and spread ideas and practices that can win. Revolutionaries come together to understand and change the world. We study the history of class struggle. We learn from our political forebears. We learn from the exploited and oppressed, including those around us and those nowhere near us in space or time. We attempt to synthesize what we learn into a coherent conception of society and to a plan of attack on it. That's Marxism in a nutshell. Engels identified three interconnected forms of struggle: the economic, the political, and the ideological. In economic struggle, workers fight our bosses. In political struggle, we fight the boss's state. And in ideological struggle, we fight against the ideas that the bosses have installed like malware into our brains. In political and economic struggle, we fight against our enemies. But in ideological struggle, we fight against our enemies' ideas in the minds of our allies. Those ideas, the ruling ideas, seek to justify the existing arrangement of society and to foreclose any possibility of system change. Revolutionary organization brings together the more advanced elements of the working class to systematically counter the influence of the ruling ideas. This involves what I like to call intra-left combat, mostly against liberalism and reformism, the dominant ideas in social movements, but also against ultra-leftism and the various socialisms from above, which also lead struggle in the wrong direction. Ultimately, the purpose of the Revolutionary Party is to organize the insurrection. But in the meantime, it must win countless lesser battles and debates within the movement. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Our immediate task is not to build a revolutionary party, but to grow and improve our tiny propaganda groups, and when it makes sense to merge them. We must not overestimate our capabilities and our tasks. We can't fast forward to an effective revolutionary party just because we desperately need to. Our situation is undoubtedly urgent, but we must be diligent and patient with goals so modest as to seem disrespectful of that urgency, like getting 20 people to read Rosa Luxemburg together. Overestimating our capabilities and our current tasks or catastrophizing about our predicament can lead to opportunism, adventurism, or a combination of both. That could look like tailing a movement's politics in order to recruit, papering over significant differences in order to fuse groups, or going underground prematurely because fascism seems to be at the door. Our immediate task is not to build mass organization based on joint activity, but cadre organization based on a clear and coherent set of politics. Cadre is a military term swiped by socialists to mean the core activists of a revolutionary organization, dedicated opponents of the system, thinkers and fighters, students and teachers, and what Gramsci called permanent persuaders. Such an organization must strive to become a relevant fighting force, but its near-term interventions will be more ideological than practical. We can't snap our fingers and materialize a mass revolutionary party, but developing cadre and building interventionist propaganda groups, to borrow a term from Socialist Alternative, we can lay the necessary foundation. To our Socialist Horizon comrades, we need each other. This was made particularly clear by the domination of the Palestine Solidarity Movement by Social Democrats, Stalinists, and Maoists, and then made more clear by the campus left's reaction to the fall of Assad. We're alone in a wilderness of garbage politics. We belong together, but only on a firm foundation. We're in close political agreement. Justin recently said that we're more politically united than the Bolsheviks on the eve of revolution, and I tend to agree, though there are a lot of disagreements. But I don't think that's Justin's point. We do share a political lineage. We share a focus on class struggle and class independence, and on anti-oppression and social movements. We both reject electoralism and campism. But we need to agree on strategy too, specifically on cadre building, propaganda, and socialist intervention. We should organize around a clear and specific set of politics rather than around common work. It makes no sense for us to combine with those pointing toward the Squad and the Democratic Party, or Chavismo, or the so-called axis of resistance, or a protracted people's war, or communes, or co-ops as the way forward. These politics are incompatible with ours and must be debated and defeated, ultimately, not accommodated to or invited into our organizations. And we need to shed any hesitation about the need to argue with people, about the need for polemic, and for focusing on what distinguishes our politics from the rest of the left. In Firebrand, we think we're stronger on our own than those that do not take up this basic strategy, which seems to us like basic Leninism. But to wrap up, the approach I've sketched out here underpins our dedication to the study of the history of class struggle and to Marxist theory, strategy, and tactics, which are no more than the synthesized lessons of that history. It's the motivation for learning to think, argue, and fight together as Marxists, for standing with the rebels on picket lines and against riot lines, come what may, for all the meetings and readings and writings and kickoffs and report backs and discussions, for making hard arguments about what should be done next at crucial junctures in a movement, for building locally while reaching for higher levels of national organization and international connection, for flying our red flag high as a signal to all who might take at least a few steps forward with us. We may be few, we may be unable to flex as fully as we'd like to at this point, but we do have a firm grasp on genuine Marxism and Leninism. They're the best tool set for understanding the compounding crises and cruelties of capitalism, and the best tool set for organizing its downfall. And I'm looking forward to using them together with you, comrades, more effectively. So glad to be at the table with you, comrades, in Socialist Horizon, back at the table, and glad to be in the struggle with you all until victory.
All right. Thank you, comrade. Powerful. Very nice. Appreciate that. Kim, have you located your presentation? All right.
Yes.
Outstanding. Well, this
Yes.
is going to follow, Kim's is going to follow really nicely from James because I know this is a great presentation. Go for it, Kim.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. In this presentation, I hope to lay out a picture of the material circumstances we find ourselves in as revolutionary socialists here in the USA today. We as revolutionaries have the intention of organizing differently to the two main forms of political trends on the left, the first being reformism, as is represented by the politics of the DSA, Bernie Sanders, and AOC, and the other by a myriad of Stalinist organizations. Our orientation is instead one based on socialism from below, i.e. a Leninist project, which involves creating an organization with a clear political point of view that endeavors to engage with mass movements, strikes, rebellions, and revolutionary upheavals. Growing the numbers of highly class-conscious and committed revolutionary workers via this participation allows us to build up an ever larger, stronger project capable of leading the struggle against ruling classes nationally and internationally. We have the aim of overthrowing the capitalist state and replacing it with a socialist society, aiming ultimately to become a communist one. In the US, we have a system of two proudly capitalist parties who differ largely in style versus substance. Republican and Democrats are committed to repressing and exploiting the working classes and oppressed groups. The ruling class makes any attempt at any alternative voice within government, let alone building an alternative reformist third party, impossible. As we know, the Democratic Party, with the full agreement of the Republican Party, is responsible for financing the murder of 65,000 people and the displacement of 2 million people in the Gaza genocide to the tune of $21 million in the last 18 months. I think it's critical we start our analysis with the genocide, given the Democratic Party is considered by unions and millions of others as the party of workers and oppressed communities. Their willingness to finance a genocide for the purpose of controlling the mining, processing, and distribution of black gold clearly puts that lie to bed. Democratic administrations and Republican administrations alike endlessly attack migrants via Border Patrol, ICE, detention centers, remain in Mexico policy, and mass deportations. They criminalize vast numbers of human beings by falsely claiming that they are, quote, muling fentanyl, or, quote, perpetuating crime, and, quote, using resources meant for native-born citizens to scapegoat undocumented immigrants and asylum seekers. They do this as they need to deflect their own responsibility for the conditions faced by underpaid native-born workers struggling to access groceries, rent, and health care. Additionally, attacking and repressing migrant workers while simultaneously hiring them is critical, as it provides bosses with a highly controlled and therefore more exploitable and disposable workforce. While the Democrats failed at increasing the minimum wage, creating national health care, ending government student loans, or addressing the climate crisis, they succeeded at crushing unions, expanding fracking, bombing countries across the globe, and enabling the genocide we are currently witnessing in Palestine. The shock and awe from the endless executive orders handed down by Trump since his first day in office and their repercussions have rattled workers, seniors, and oppressed communities' senses of well-being and actual well-being, causing protests on campuses and in cities large and small across the country that have been led mostly by either pro-Palestine groups or liberal pro-Democratic Party organizations. The New World Order will have consequences that cannot be addressed by these means and will rather require radical mass protests, strikes, and rebellions. Today, we see that migrants of every status, trans people, queer people, and those who can become pregnant are all in the crosshairs, as are people of color and disabled individuals. We see attacks on DEI, gutting the federal public education system, curtailing FEMA, firing tens of thousands of federal workers and ending union rights for hundreds of thousands hobbles and potentially ends state programs from Head Start to cancer research. Xenophobia of every type will continue to be promoted by the media, bosses, and politicians. Liberals will continue to liberal, promoting business unions, Democratic politicians, and the courts as the answer to the crisis for which all of the reasons I shared above will undoubtedly fail. The endless chaos Trump has ushered in has the whole country/world on edge. The changes to international financial arrangements, from the free trade globalization of the last several decades to the isolationist tariffs on a seemingly endless roller coaster, will in fact hasten a world recession as corporations and governments make decisions about how and whether to invest, to buy and sell stocks, land, corporations, and raw materials, and potentially to engage in open warfare for the Panama Canal, Greenland, Iran, as well as continue the wars over Gaza and Ukraine. This precariousness will inevitably lead to large-scale inflation, layoffs, foreclosures, hunger, homelessness, misery, and death. The consequences of these actions will cause millions of people to look right, but millions of others will look left. As revolutionary socialists, we know we live in a global capitalist and imperialist system that without a mass fight from millions of workers here in the US and hundreds of millions around the world, will continue down this disastrous road. We don't know when mass struggle will break out, but we can be sure it will happen, suddenly and explosively, as we are currently seeing in Argentina. We know from living in the belly of the beast that each person who becomes a revolutionary socialist will become a leader, and the leadership they can each offer matters. Nature abhors a vacuum. The Democrats expect to win big in 18 months, but the damage is already well underway, and neither party can stop the existing and impending crisis. It is critical that we come together to fight for revolutionary organization across the US and internationally, and in fact is the only way we can win. We can't know where rebellions will explode. We know that they will happen. The more that comrades in communities, states, countries, and even continents are tied together through serious socialist organization, the more possible successful revolutions become. Revolution is not a pipe dream. It is an inevitable circumstance and reaction to the injustices felt throughout the world today. And we as revolutionary socialists need to be ready to respond effectively to bring about, once and for all, the fall of capitalism and imperialism. And for this to happen, we need a united and strong revolutionary socialist organization. Today, we in many ways find ourselves in an inverse world to that of the one Lenin built with the Bolsheviks. Unlike Lenin and the Bolsheviks, we do not live in a barely capitalized society where 90% of the population are peasants who'd only become free of serfdom 30 years prior. On the contrary, in 2025, our world is overwhelmingly developed with the capacity to create wealth in abundance, including food, housing, healthcare, and all the necessities everyone could require for a meaningful life. What is not inverse and makes the need for an organization that aspires to become a Leninist party is the size and character of the ruling class and its states. Laws, courts, police, prisons, ICE, BPS, detention centers inside and outside of US borders, weaponry, the Army, Navy, Air Force, National Guard. Additionally, the ownership of mainstream media, the regulation of primary education and higher education, and most silently, but most powerfully, corporate power over workers with the capacity to hire, fire, and dictate conditions of employment. And in the US, of course, also the only way to access quality healthcare. That overwhelming capitalist infrastructure, if you will, means the state is intensely powerful, organized, and institutionalized. Our one opportunity to end this tyranny, lies in our ability to organize ourselves, not only to strike, but to make those strikes meaningful by building a mass revolutionary party out of them. I hope this information will be helpful in framing why it's so critical we begin working towards such a formation as soon as possible. Bringing existing revolutionary organizations who believe in revolutionary struggle from below and are moving towards ever greater political agreement matters in today's dire national and international circumstances. We need a party that's opposed to both capitalist parties. We need an organization that's clear on the critical need to build an explicitly Leninist party. Capitalism is global. Revolutionary socialists must be international if there's any hope of an ultimate victory. We will not win if we do not oppose Stalinism and reformism and actively organize an anti-fascist movement. Workers will never take control of society and win a revolution if they are divided. Fighting every form of oppression is critical. I look forward to discussing these thoughts with all of you in a more detailed way this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. Thank you for reminding us of the need for ourselves to organize and to do this internationally, that we can only win working class revolution by joining hands across borders, and which is why we are so happy to have two of our comrades here from across those borders. And I want to turn now to our third speaker, Alejandro Bodart from the Argentine MST. So thank you, Alejandro, for coming. We're really honored that you're here, and we look forward to hearing your discussion. The floor is yours. Thank you.
En primer lugar,
Okay.
felicitaciones a
In the
los
first
compañeros
place,
que organizaron esta
congratulations
actividad.
to the
Creo que
comrades who have organized this event.
este debate se da en un momento muy importante.
This debate is taking place in a very important
Estamos
time
presenciando una
because
reconfiguración de
we
la
are
orden imperialista
witnessing
mundial.
a reconfiguration of the
Ustedes
world
están
imperialist
en el
system.
país donde el presidente Trump es el que está impulsando
You are
esto.
in the country where
Daría
President
para
Trump
hacer un
is
debate, ¿no?,
pushing
entre
this
todos
from.
nosotros para terminar de interpretar
This
bien lo que
alone
está pasando,
merits
porque
a
hay
debate
cambios muy de
amongst
carácter
us
histórico,
to
podríamos decir.
interpret
Porque
this
está muriendo
situation in
lo
the best way
que
possible because
el
there are
viejo orden
changes of
mundial de
a
posguerra, lo
historic
que quedaba de ese
magnitude.
viejo orden
The
mundial de
order
posguerra, lo que había
organized
sobrevivido a la caída del
almost
estalinismo,
since the
está
last World
cayendo.
War is
Está
falling
cayendo la
apart.
globalización como política o como orientación que
Globalization
dio
as
el
the
imperialismo
orientation
triunfante
of
de la Guerra
the
Fría,
winning
y por lo tanto estamos
the
en un momento de
imperialism of the
transición
Cold War
donde
is
está
falling apart
cayendo
as
lo
well.
viejo y todavía no se sabe
So
bien
we're
qué es lo
in
que
a period
vendrá.
of transition in which the old is falling
Ahora,
apart.
como socialistas
What will come
revolucionarios,
to replace it
sabemos
is
que
still
el trasfondo
not
de estos
clear.
cambios es que la crisis
Now, as
capitalista,
revolutionary socialists,
sobre
we know
todo la
that
que se abrió en el 2008,
in the roots of
no se ha
this
cerrado.
is that the
El
capitalist
imperialismo no ha
crisis that
logrado
exploded
cerrar esa
in
crisis.
2008
El imperialismo
hasn't been
estadounidense se fue
closed. Imperialism has
debilitando.
been unable to
Le salieron,
resolve that crisis.
nosotros decimos
The
que le
main
salió el tiro
imperialist
por la
power of the
culata
United
porque
States
creyó con la
is
caída de la Unión Soviética que iba a
weakening.
lograr
We think their
semicolonizar
shot
a los
backfired
países
because they
donde se
thought that the
restauró el
fall of the Soviet
capitalismo,
Union would
pero
allow
eso
them
no
to
sucedió. Los principales
semi-colonize
países
that part of the
de
world,
la
and that
vieja
didn't
Unión
happen.
Soviética y del arco del socialismo real
The
terminaron
countries
transformándose
of
en
the
competidores del
ex-Soviet
imperialismo
Union and its bloc
estadounidense y del
ended up
imperialismo
becoming
occidental.
competitors
E incluso
of
surgió China
Western
como un
imperialism.
imperialismo, un competidor global, y hay una
Even
disputa
as regional
imperialista
power, and
en
China has
curso.
risen as a
Trump la
global
quiere
competitor.
resolver como un cowboy,
And Trump wants to
a
resolve
intentar
this
por
like
la
a cowboy,
fuerza forzar un nuevo orden.
trying to
Lo más
force a new
probable es que
order into
estamos en un
being.
momento donde más que primar un orden hay un gran desorden mundial, por eso
But
le
we're in
sigue
a
a la
period in
vuelta
which, more
los
than a
ecos
new
de
order,
este hombre,
seeing the
pero
beginnings
lo
of
que sí
new disorder.
lo que nosotros vemos es que la
what we
salida que
do
van a intentar los
see
distintos sectores del
is that
imperialismo va a
the
ser un ataque global
resolution they will
a los derechos de
attempt
los
is a
trabajadores y de los
global
pueblos.
attack
Ya lo estamos
on
viendo,
workers'
ya lo
rights
están
and
viendo en
people's
Estados
rights. We're
Unidos,
already seeing
pero es
this.
parte de una ofensiva
You're clearly
global,
seeing this in
sectores
the
de la
United States,
burguesía que
but it's
ya
part of a
empiezan a
global
apostar
offensive
por fuerzas de ultraderecha, porque
where
la
significant parts
democracia
of the
como tal ya no
bourgeoisie
les
begin to
sirve
bet
para poder
on
aplicar los
far
planes
right
que intentan aplicar, y por lo
options
tanto, en muchos lugares del
because
mundo la opción que están teniendo
bourgeois
es de
democracy is no
apoyar
longer being
gobiernos de
useful
ultraderecha que
to
vienen
push through their
a
plans.
intentar
And so they're
arrasar con los
shifting to
derechos
supporting
conquistados de los
far right
trabajadores, de las
governments
minorías, de los
to
sindicatos.
come do
Esto
away
plantea
with
un
the
problema
rights that are
porque
left
va a
of
haber
workers,
resistencia
migrants,
del
women.
movimiento obrero y demás. Allá hay
This
resistencia, pero
poses a
esto se va a ir
problem because there will be
profundizando
resistance by the
cada vez
mass
más,
movement.
porque el
There
ataque es tan
already is some,
global que el
but we
movimiento de
think this will
masas
deepen
no va a dejar
because the attack
que
is
se
so
avance
global
sin dar pelea. Por eso sí, vamos a un
that
mundo
the mass
donde va a
movement
haber
won't
muchas
allow this
luchas,
to
muchas
pass without
resistencias,
putting up a
rebeliones,
fight.
revoluciones,
So we think we're heading
porque el
into a world
imperialismo en su
in which
afán
there will be
de
many
intentar fortalecerse va a
rebellions,
fomentarlos. De hecho, lo
wars,
estamos viendo, lo hemos visto
because
en
in
Ucrania,
this
estamos
rearrangement,
viendo una ofensiva
different powers
grupal
will fight
sobre el
for
pueblo palestino. Esto se va a
advancing on
intensificar.
others. We're
Ahora,
seeing this in
el gran
Ukraine,
problema es
in
cuál es
the
la tarea de los
massacre, the genocide
revolucionarios en
against
este mundo
Palestinian
que está
people.
provocando
Now
cambios
the key
y una
is, what is the
intención
task
cada vez
revolutionaries
mayor del
have in
imperialismo, de las burguesías de
this world, in this
atacar a los
transition?
trabajadores. ¿Cuál es la tarea que tenemos? Porque el gran problema que
What's the main
tenemos los
task we have?
trabajadores y los pueblos es que
Because the
damos
huge
pelea,
problem
pero
workers and peoples
con los
have
brazos atados,
is
porque no
that they
tenemos
fight,
enfrente una
but
dirección
with their hands tied behind their back,
revolucionaria para enfrentar la magnitud del
because we
ataque
don't
que
have a
están viviendo.
revolutionary leadership
Por eso
to
nosotros somos unos
confront an
convencidos
attack
de que la
of this
gran tarea
magnitude.
que tenemos los revolucionarios
We
es
are
tratar
convinced
de
that
colaborar,
the
de
great
ayudar a
task that
construir la dirección que
revolutionaries
hace
have
falta.
is to collaborate with building that leadership that we need.
Porque, y que esa tarea para nosotros tiene un primer punto, o sea,
And
no
that
es solo
this
una
task
tarea nacional,
has a
es una
first
tarea
point,
internacional, porque
that
es
it's
muy
not a
difícil que
national
desde un país
task,
logremos
it's an
resolver el
international
problema de la
task.
dirección si no somos
Because it is
parte también
very
de una
difficult to try to
organización
resolve this problem of
a
leadership
nivel
within
internacional.
one
Ahora, ¿cómo
country. It's very
hacer
difficult to do so if we're not
esa
part of
dirección que hace
an
falta? ¿Cómo
international
empezar a dar los primeros
organization that is
pasos
fighting
para ello?
United
Porque hay
Together. So
distintos
how do we do
niveles de
this? To
acumulación
build this
en los distintos
organization,
países.
to take the
No
first
es lo mismo, hay
steps
países donde
towards
hay cierto
resolving
grado de
this,
acumulación mayor que otros. Ustedes están en
because
un
there's
país donde
different
venimos de una
situations
catástrofe, porque
in
la
revolutionary building.
organización revolucionaria que
With
se
more
había
accumulation and
construido
less
durante
accumulation,
años y
in
años y
this
años,
country, you're coming from a
cuando más se la
catastrophe because
necesitaba,
the
explotó.
organization that
¿Quién la
built
hizo?
over
¿No es cierto? Y por lo tanto
decades and
hay un nivel de
decades
atomización muy grande. Pero a
an
nivel internacional,
organization,
más
when it
allá
was
de que hay
most
países
needed,
donde tenemos más
it
acumulación que otros,
dissolved.
pasa lo mismo. Lo que
This
ocurre es
was
la
the ISO.
dispersión. Nosotros creemos que la
Now,
tarea más
overall,
importante que
most
tenemos
everywhere
los
we go,
revolucionarios es intentar reagruparnos, reagrupar las
what
fuerzas
there's most of
revolucionarias.
is
No hay
dispersion.
ninguna corriente en el
That's why
plano
the task of the
internacional que
day
por sí
is
sola pueda responder
regroupment.
bien a esta
There's
tarea.
no
Ni tampoco hay a
tendency, there's
nivel
no
nacional
current that
ningún grupo
has
que
a
por sí
chance on
solo
its own
pueda
of
responder
resolving
y
any of
resolver
this.
este problema. Por eso
There's
el
no
desafío
country in the world in
mayor
which
que
one
nosotros
force
creemos
has
que
the
tenemos los
capacity of resolving
revolucionarios
any of
es
this.
hacer los
That's why
máximos
the
esfuerzos por
greatest challenge
reagruparnos entre
revolutionaries have
nosotros.
today is to make the maximum efforts to
Con un
regroup
objetivo, porque
revolutions
no es solo juntarnos
with
por
an objective,
juntarnos, sino
because it's not to
reagruparnos
regroup
para
just to
intentar
regroup.
dar los pasos en la
It's
construcción de una alternativa
regroup to take
revolucionaria.
steps towards building a
Después podemos
revolutionary.
discutir los ritmos que tome esto y
We can debate the
qué
rhythm.
tan rápido podamos avanzar o no, pero si no
How fast
empezamos a
can we
reagruparnos con
advance?
el objetivo de
But if
construir
we don't begin
alternativas
to regroup
revolucionarias,
with the
tanto en el
objective of
plano
building
internacional como nacional,
revolutionary
nosotros creemos que no
alternatives
estamos respondiendo al
nationally and
desafío del hombre.
internationally,
Nosotros
we're
venimos de
going to
una
be mistaken
experiencia en la
on
Liga
what
Internacional
the challenge
Socialista,
of the
que es
day
un gran
is.
reagrupamiento internacional
We're in the
de
middle of an
distintas
experience now
corrientes
with the
que hemos
International League,
decidido juntarnos,
which is
venimos
a
de
project of
distintas
regroupment
experiencias,
of
de distintas
different
experiencias.
currents
En la
who
Liga
we
Internacional
come from different
Socialista conseguimos
experiences, from
compañeros
different
de
traditions.
varias de las familias que hemos conformado el trotskismo después de
We
la Segunda
coexist in the
Guerra Mundial.
ISL.
Nosotros creemos que
Organizations
todas
come
esas
from
familias
different
que se fueron
families
conformando
of
jugaron un rol
the
importante, que es
revolutionary
mantener
movement in
la
the world.
llama
We think each
revolucionaria
of
en la
those
etapa
families
negra,
played a
que nos tocó
significant
vivir el
role, an important
fortalecimiento
role
del estalinismo,
through
¿no es
the
cierto? Un
previous
momento muy
period,
difícil,
which was
pero
to
que como
sustain
proyectos
our revolutionary
individuales
flags
ya
through very difficult times against
no responden a
Stalinism.
la tarea de la
And
época. Ninguna de esas
but
familias ha
as
logrado
individual parts
responder
no longer
correctamente a la situación. Y por eso ha
respond to
tomado
the
la crisis
tasks
en
at hand
muchas de
today.
ellas. Yo no me quiero referir a tal o cual.
And none of
Yo
them have been been
de
able
una
to
de esas
resolve
familias
these
que estalló
problems.
también en los
And
90. Por lo
that's
tanto, creo
why
que
we've
todos
all
los
ended
que
up in
en
crisis.
algún
I can
momento hemos
speak for mine.
intentado construir
The dependency we come
desde
from
ahí,
exploding
no
unit
lo hemos
prices.
logrado. Por eso creemos que en el
So
plano
we did not
internacional
resolve
lo
it.
que está planteado es intentar superar las
So
viejas corrientes
internationally,
de las cuales venimos y tratar de conformar
the
una
task we
nueva
have before
corriente
us is to
internacional,
overcome
donde
the
podamos
different
convivir los
traditions
distintos
we
sectores,
come
¿no es
from
cierto?
and
Que
to
hemos
build a new
intentado de
tradition
distintas
together,
maneras, ¿no es cierto?,
taking the best
trasladarle a
of
los
what we
trabajadores
find in
que la
each of
única
our
perspectiva es el socialismo
traditions
mundial, que hay que derrotar el capitalismo. No es una tarea fácil
and
reagruparse
uniting on the
entre
basis of
distintas corrientes o entre
key
compañeros que
political
venimos de
agreements
distintas
are
experiencias.
fighting for
Tenemos que tener mucha
revolutionary
paciencia entre
socialism. It's not
nosotros,
easy.
tenemos que
We come
saber
from
trabajar en un
different
marco donde
experiences, very different
podemos tener
experiences.
muchos
We have
acuerdos,
to
pero también podemos llegar a
know
tener
how
muchos
to
matices,
work together
pero el
with a
objetivo
healthy
mayor tiene que ser
method, because
dar
we can
los
have
pasos
many
para
agreements, we
intentar
can have
conformar
disagreements
una
on some things.
organización nueva.
We have to be able to
Nosotros en
debate
la LIC
them.
convivimos
But the
cerca de
objective has
30,
to be clear to
35
take steps
países,
towards building
compañeros, como les
revolutionary
digo, que
organizations.
venimos de distintas alternativas. Ahora, ¿qué nos unió?
We have in the ISL
Primero, una interpretación común de lo que
organizations
está pasando en el mundo, que es
from
muy
about
importante que
25
tengamos
countries
una
that come from all
interpretación
different
común de lo que está
tendencies
pasando,
and
que
experiences,
tratemos de
but it's united on
buscar
the basis of
políticas comunes
having
para responder a los
a
grandes hechos de
common
la lucha de clases, que
assessment
tengamos,
of
no digo un
the
programa
situation,
acabado, pero
of the
sí en
problems
cuenta
of
que
where we want
necesitamos
to
ponernos
go,
de acuerdo en
that
las 10 o
has
15
a
tareas más
common
importantes que
program,
tenemos que
which doesn't have
resolver
to be
para
a
intentar
program that agrees on
responder a las
absolutely
necesidades de
everything,
los
but that agrees
trabajadores, las
on the
necesidades de los pueblos.
key
Y por sobre todas las
series of
cosas,
questions we need
un
to
método nuevo. Yo creo que tenemos
respond
que
to.
rediscutir el método de las
And
distintas
secondly,
corrientes que llegaron
and
hasta acá, porque
fundamentally, to
lamentablemente,
agree on
incluso las
a
corrientes
method,
que veníamos del
because
chavismo,
unfortunately,
muchas veces hemos
all of
mamado
us
mucho
come
del
from
estalinismo y hemos
tendencies
construido
that
métodos burocráticos,
we
métodos que no nos han
criticize
permitido fortalecer
Stalinism
las organizaciones, sino que ante el primer
a
debate, la
lot,
primera discusión, nos
but had
volvimos
methods that
estallidos.
were
O sea, tenemos que
also problematic.
reaprender entre todos nosotros cómo
So we have
conformar,
to
cómo reagruparnos como
relearn, we have to
revolucionarios.
re-educate
Ahora,
ourselves on
si no logramos
with what methods
reagruparnos
we need
entre
to build our
nosotros,
organizations and
difícilmente
debate,
podamos responder a la tarea que
work
están
together.
planteadas. Por eso creo que hay que hacer un esfuerzo para eso. Y
Now,
esto que es
if
algo
we don't
internacional,
regroup
también es un esfuerzo que
amongst
tenemos que
ourselves,
hacer en el plano
we
nacional.
will
Yo sé
not
que
likely be able to respond to the problems we have.
seguramente aquí hay dos grupos o dos sectores que se están reagrupando. Hay muchos más por fuera,
In
seguramente,
this
que
meeting,
no
there's
están en esta
two
reunión, sino hay otros grupos que están
groups that
intentando
are
resolver. Ahora,
debating
hay que
groups.
dar un
I know
primer
there's
paso
many
para
more who
nosotros, que es
are part of the discussion as
discutir
well.
si esta es la
Now we
tarea
have to take a
fundamental.
first step,
Mire, la LIS no se
which
autoproclama una
is
nueva
to
internacional,
discuss if
porque
this
sabemos que
is
estamos
the
lejos de
key
ser una
task we have.
internacional en el
The
sentido
IXL does
de
not
lo que es una
self-proclamate
verdadera internacional,
itself
sino
as
que se postule que tenga peso en el movimiento de masas en algunos
an
países.
international.
Ahora,
We know we're taking
si aspiramos a
steps in that
colaborar para
direction.
construir esa nueva
Now,
internacional y nos
we do aspire
reagrupamos en
to
torno a
build
ese
that
objetivo,
international.
yo creo que la gran
And
tarea que
we
tienen
organize
ustedes en uno
around
de los
that
principales
objective.
países del mundo es ver si pueden
I think the
empezar a
task you
ponerse
have
de
here in one of
acuerdo
the main countries in the
en que
world
la tarea
to see
es
if you can
empezar a
begin to
reagruparse con el objetivo
reach
de
an
empezar a
agreement
dar pasos en la
that
construcción
the
de un partido
task is to regroup,
revolucionario. Porque
but to
es
take steps
cierto de
towards that
que
revolutionary party.
mañana no se va a construir un partido revolucionario que no depende
It's
solo
true
de
that it's not going to
nosotros.
be
Pero si no
built
se empieza a dar el primer
overnight,
paso, ojo que
but
se
if we don't
corre el
take the
riesgo de
first
no
step,
llegar nunca a construirlo.
we risk
Hace
never
falta por lo menos un
reaching
polo
that.
consciente que se plantee esta tarea
We at
y
least need
que no
a
sea
pole
una
that is
tarea
very conscious about
sectaria,
this,
que se autoproclame como que ya resolvió los
that
problemas, pero
doesn't
que dé el primer
self-proclamate
paso.
itself
Porque si no hay alguien que
in a
da el primer
sectarian way,
paso, es muy
but that takes
difícil
the first
después
step. Because
avanzar
if
y
no one takes
reagruparse
the
con
first
otros.
step, it's
Entonces
very
yo, por
difficult
lo
to
menos de la
advance in
experiencia
regrouping with
nuestra
others.
a nivel internacional,
At least
es
from
que
our
dar el primer
experience
paso, empezar a reagruparnos,
internationally,
los que
is
tenemos
that
una
taking the
comprensión
first step
común de
to
lo que está
regroup
pasando en el mundo,
those
de
of
esta
us who have
necesidad
a
de
common
empezar
understanding of
a
what's
dar pasos
happening
hacia
and
la
what we need to
construcción
do
en el plano internacional de una internacional, en los planos locales de un partido revolucionario, dar este primer
to take
paso
these
es un
steps
punto
in
fundamental, un
building
punto
a common
fundamental.
international
Y yo
organization and
creo
to
que los
build
que
common
tenemos más o menos
organizations
algunos
in a
puntos de
country.
acuerdo, vale la pena hacer
I
este
think those
esfuerzo.
of
Por
us who
eso
have
felicitamos
sufficient
a los
points of
compañeros
agreement
de
need to take
Horizonte
these steps.
Socialista que han tenido
That's
esta
why
iniciativa
we
y que
congratulate
han
the
empezado a plantear este
comrades of
debate
Socialist Rising who had this
y esta
initiative,
tarea.
who have begun to have this
Nosotros
debate
vamos a
and to
ayudar y
take
a
up this
colaborar.
task.
Hemos charlado incluso con los
We're going to
compañeros de
help
Alternativa Socialista de
and
acá. Nos
collaborate
hemos reunido incluso porque vemos un
in this
problema en
task in
Estados
whatever way
Unidos.
we can. We've
O
discussed
sea,
this with the
el
comrades
mundo
from
mira a
Socialist
Estados
Alternative
Unidos. Los socialistas
Australia as
revolucionarios
well,
miramos a Estados Unidos. Y lamentablemente en Estados Unidos
because
hoy
the
no hay
world
un
looks at the
polo
United States. Us
revolucionario
revolutionaries,
fuerte.
we look at
Ahora,
the United States,
nosotros
and
queremos
unfortunately, there is a
ayudar a
strong
dar los
revolutionary
primeros
pull
pasos en
here.
eso. Y estamos
Now, we
dispuestos a
want to
hacer
help
todos los esfuerzos que tengamos a nivel internacional
to
para
make
ayudar a
these
nuestros
first steps
países, que en
happen,
Estados Unidos
to
quieran dar
help the
estos primeros
comrades
pasos.
who want to
Para
take
nosotros
these
sería
first
muy
steps to
importante
do
entre estas
so.
dos organizaciones que están acá, si se empieza a abrir un
Also, it would be
diálogo
very
en este
important
sentido.
first step
Porque
if these two
permitiría
organizations that
empezar
are in this
desde
panel
ahí a dialogar con
take
otros
steps in this
actores.
direction.
O sea,
It would be
ahora,
that would
el
allow
problema central es si nos
to open up
animamos a dar el
a
primer
more
paso o
significant
no.
discussion with others.
Si no nos animamos a dar el primer paso, hasta esperar que
Now,
haya más condiciones objetivas y subjetivas,
we
corremos el
can't wait
riesgo de perder una
for
oportunidad. Estados
for
Unidos está
different objective
fortaleciendo
circumstances to
direcciones
take
que no
these first
tendrían que
steps.
ser la dirección que se fortalezca en un proceso como
In this
este.
country, there are leaderships
Sectores
that are
neostalinistas,
growing that
el
should not be
reformismo anda
growing.
dando una gira por
Stalinist sections,
todo Estados Unidos
reformism,
para intentarse postular como alternativa, y lo que falta son los revolucionarios postulándose
and what's
como
missing
una
is a
alternativa
revolutionary
frente a
alternative
esto. Sí, somos pequeños
as
todavía,
an alternative to them.
pero
Yes,
para hacer algo
we're still
grande se
small,
empieza por un primer paso. Si no hay primer
but
paso,
to do
nunca
something
vamos a
big, we
lograr
begin by
construir
the
algo
first step.
grande. Entonces yo creo que ustedes tienen un
If there isn't the
desafío
first
tremendo, y
steps,
es
we'll never
ahora
make
el
something big.
desafío de empezar a reagruparse para
I think
empezar
you
a
guys
dar
have
el
a
primer
challenge,
paso
and you
para
have this
construir un patrón
challenge
revolucionario. Sin
now
sectarismo,
to take
sin
those first steps towards
autoproclamación,
that,
para
without
llamar a otros a
sectarianism,
que sigan este
not
ejemplo. Porque
proclaiming
hay más
ourselves,
revolucionarios aparte de los que están acá. Hay muchos
because
revolucionarios en
there
Estados
are
Unidos.
other
El problema es que
revolutionaries
están
other than
esperando
who we
muchos
are
de
here.
ellos alguien que les mire, que
The
les
problem is many of
ahí.
them are
Y yo creo que
waiting
esa es la
for
tarea que
someone
tenemos planteada.
to
En el
take those
plano
first steps
internacional,
and
nosotros
provide that
sabemos que no somos
dynamic.
la internacional que hace falta, pero la colaboración nuestra está
We
en
don't think we are
darle
the
a los
international that
revolucionarios
the
que
world
estemos por
needs.
lo menos cada día un
But
poquito
our
más
aim is to
cerca de
take
ese
those first
objetivo. Y
steps
creo que esa es
to
la tarea que tienen
draw
planteado también
more
ustedes.
into
Empezar a
that
dar los
discussion
primeros
and to
pasos
take us closer and
reagrupándose,
closer to
aunque
achieving.
seamos poquitos, para crear la
So to
llama que
take the
pueda
first
ser
steps,
seguida
even
después
though
por
we may
otros.
be
Y
few,
ojo, que
but to
ante el
spark,
tremendo ataque de la clase que está sufriendo la clase
and
trabajadora y
that
los pueblos,
careful,
va a haber
because
una reacción.
with the tremendous
Incluso
attack
este nuevo
that
cambio
there
que
is
se
today
está
against the
produciendo en el
peoples,
mapa
there's going
mundial
to be a
puede generar
reaction.
que a nivel de la
And what is happening
conciencia
in the world,
mucha
this could
gente
generate
empiece a pensar y a mirar hacia la izquierda.
a
El
jump
hecho
in
de que la
consciousness
burguesía esté
that
abandonando
many
la
people
democracia como
turn and look
sistema,
to the left.
que durante mucho tiempo permitió confundir a los trabajadores, porque el
The fact
imperialismo
that the
estadounidense se
imperialist
mostraba como una
bourgeoisie is
alternativa
abandoning
democrática
the
frente a
idea
los
of championing
regímenes
democracy,
autoritarios, que hoy el imperialismo
who for many
estadounidense está
years
abandonando la democracia y se
paraded itself
transforme
as the
en una
defender
fuerza de
of democracy
ultraderecha,
against
va a
authoritarians,
abrirle cabeza a sectores de los trabajadores en
them
Estados
abandoning
Unidos
that is
y a
going to
nivel
open the
mundial.
heads of
Ahora,
many people
si esa
who may
cabeza que se
look
empieza a abrir no
to the
encuentra
left.
nadie que le guíe mínimamente el camino, se va a perder una
Now, if those
oportunidad. Y
people
yo
who
creo
look
que
to the
la
left
tarea
don't
nuestra es
find
dejar
anyone
de
who
desaprovechar
can
oportunidades. Los revolucionarios tenemos que empezar a ponernos como objetivo, empezar a
turn to the
aprovechar
left
las
and don't see
oportunidades,
anyone
aunque sean
telling
mínimas
them,
hoy
come,
día.
it's this way,
Porque
we're not going to have a chance.
tomando el ejemplo que no sé qué dijo Jordan con relación al compañero que primero
So
escribió
taking the example
bolchevique,
of the
porque no me la dijo a mí, no me la
Jordan of
dijo a
the
mí, pero
Bolsheviks,
coincido en
I didn't
ese
because I didn't
tema, que
hear, but I
tenemos más
agree
acuerdos que los tenían los
that we have
bolcheviques, pero
greater
también hay que tomar
agreements than the
otra de los
Bolsheviks had.
bolcheviques. Eran un pequeño
So we
grupo
have to take
unos
another one,
años antes
that they were a small group
de la
a
revolución.
few years
Eran
before
grupos
that.
dispersos, por todo Rusia.
They
Estaban
were
dispersos en pequeños
dispersed
círculos
groups. There were groups
socialistas.
that
La
were
tarea de Lenin
divided in
fue intentar
small
unir
groups.
esos pequeños
They
grupos,
were separate.
unirlos alrededor del
And
periodo,
Lenin's
unirlos
first
alrededor de una
great task was to
organización.
try to
Y gracias
unify
a que
all
empezó a
those
reagrupar esos
dispersed
pequeños grupos que
groups
estaban
behind
dispersos,
a
unos años después
newspaper
pudo
and
resolver el problema de la
into a common
unidad, el
organization.
problema de la dirección.
And
Si
thanks
no
to
empezamos ahora,
regrouping those
compañeros,
small
nunca vamos a
groups
llegar al
is that
objetivo
he
de
had the
tener una dirección
organization with
revolucionaria de
which
masas. Tenemos
the
que
Bolsheviks were
hacer
able
el
to do what
esfuerzo
they did.
nosotros para dar los primeros pasos
We have
y
to
ver
make
cómo
this
el
effort
devenir nos
to take
lleva
the
a
first
cada
steps
vez avanzar más en agruparnos con otros. Nosotros somos
and see how
optimistas
this
sobre la
can
situación mundial.
allow us
Somos
to
optimistas de la
unite with
situación
more and
mundial
more
porque
people. We're
creemos que la
optimistic
clase trabajadora va a dar
about the
batalla,
world
que va a dejar
situation because we
arrastrar,
think
que el movimiento
the
de masa
working
no va a
class is
dejar que le
going to
saquen
resist
cada
in
una
many
de las
places.
conquistas que con sangre
The masses are
conquistó
not going
durante
to
las
allow
últimas décadas. Va a dar
everything
pelea y
they've
va a buscar a
gained
ver
over
qué respuesta se
decades
le
to be
puede
just
dar a
taken
ello.
away without
Bueno,
putting up.
seamos nosotros
We
los que
have to see what
empecemos a darle, aunque
response
sea en la
we
dimensión que
provide
cada uno de nosotros podamos.
in that
Porque si
resistance.
hacemos eso, creo que vamos a responder a la
Because if we
tarea
do
que
that,
tenemos los
I think
revolucionarios hoy, que
we
es
will be
empezar a dar
responding
pequeños
to
pasos
the
y
main
reagruparnos
task
nacional e
the revolutions have,
internacionalmente para responder al
which is to
problema que es dar pasos en la construcción de
take steps
partidos
towards
revolucionarios, que es la
regrouping
tarea de la hora.
nationally and
Bueno,
internationally.
nada más, disculpen
That's
la vehemencia, pero creo que
that's
todos
the task of
estamos
the day.
en un momento donde
I apologize for
realmente la situación
the
está en
vehemence intense, but
nos tiene que llevar a ser
we are
vehementes entre nosotros para responder a la tarea
living
que es avanzar en la
such
búsqueda de una
periods
dirección
that we have to
revolucionaria
be,
mundial y nacional.
we have to allow
Gracias.
ourselves to be intense. Thank you.
Thank you, comrade. We feel that urgency. We feel that need for a first step and that we must step towards each other. It was a very powerful argument for why we are here tonight to regroup and to build the strongest possible revolutionary party. Thank you so much, comrade. If you're hearing that in English, you can leave your setting where it is for the rest of the meeting, and the rest of the meeting will be in English. We have one final speaker. We're really, really happy that Jordan Humphreys from our comrade group in Australia, Socialist Alternative, is going to come and speak now on the same question of the need for a revolutionary party. Jordan, thank you for coming, and please go ahead and take the floor.
Awesome. And thanks so much for having me, comrades. It's really refreshing to be in a meeting with revolutionaries in the United States who aren't disinterested in, patching up some of the bad parts of the system or trying to push the Democrats a bit to the left or whatever, but are actually about, tearing the head off the system and building a revolutionary alternative to it. A lot of the newer comrades that I know here, they ask a lot when they're looking at all the crazy stuff that's going in the United States, what's happening with the revolutionary left. They want to know, like, are they, getting together, they're organizing, they're expanding their influence. So it's really, brilliant to see that there's a bunch of comrades coming together to discuss these issues and work out next steps. Something which really drove home to me the need for revolutionary organization and a mass revolutionary party in the future was when I was visiting South America at the end of last year. I went to Argentina and met up with comrades in the MST, but I also went to Chile. And partly I went there because it was the 5th anniversary of the 2019 revolt that people probably remember, a huge movement against the neoliberal government and all the attacks going on, so heroic and impressive. But one of the really revealing and confronting things about it was 5 years after that revolt, it left relatively little legacy in Chile. Like, we spoke to a lot of young people who were involved in the revolt. A lot of them didn't even want to talk to us about it. They were like, oh, we tried to change the world, we failed. It's really sad. I don't want to talk to you about that anymore. A lot of the left groups had anniversary events to talk about what happened, the way forward, what we can learn from it, and so forth. And a lot of people found it really difficult to grapple with that, considering what happened. And there was a lot of political confusion because the Boric government had co-opted a whole section of the activist movement around it, had tried to diffuse that and channel that in a way which had nothing to do with the original inspiration behind the revolt. And the thing that really drove home to me is a lot of the time, even in Australia, in our revolutionary group, you can feel like, oh, one day there'll be a big movement, mass struggle, mass protests, and then that will solve all our problems, because then everyone becomes a revolutionary, then things will be fantastic. And obviously that would be a fantastic step forward, but we need to build organization as well. It's not enough to just wait and hope for a future rebellion to break out to resolve the difficulties to the left. It also reminded me of something that Lenin talks about and what is to be done. A lot of people try and accuse him of being a substitutionalist for the mass struggles of workers, but it's actually the opposite. The reason why he was so strong on the question of the Revolutionary Party was not because he didn't have faith in the ability of workers to transform the world. It's because he did have faith. He knew that they were the ones who were going to fight back and struggle against the system, and therefore that there was a realistic basis to think that a mass revolutionary party could be formed out of that if people were willing to do the hard work of making that actually come about. Now, of course, as a number of the speakers have said, we can't click our fingers and magic up a mass revolutionary party out of nowhere. And anyone who says that, is just kind of bullshitting you. Across the world, we don't have the necessary forces to make that happen in an immediate sense. And it can be really difficult dealing with that gap between the objective need for mass revolutionary parties, considering everything that's going on, and what we're able to do in the here and now. But I think that shouldn't paralyze us. It should spur us on to do everything we can to start to build with the forces that we have. I think that's also important because there's been a lot of debates around the question of revolutionary organization in recent years, on the international left, particularly in the English-speaking world. And a number of those debates have really been kind of distractions and diversions from a lot of the main issues. So for a whole period, there was a real enthusiasm for kind of neo-reformist parties, broad left parties of various different sorts. I'm sure many comrades are familiar with that, which were often posed as the idea that revolutionary politics are so marginal, they'll never break out, they'll never be relevant. Instead, we need a new broad thing, and maybe reform versus revolution doesn't really matter anymore, and people are exaggerating its significance and aren't you so sectarian for talking about revolution when we just need, big, broad organizations in order to push the left forward? And that could seem to respond to a real desperate need to rebuild the workers' movement, the left, in a situation of crisis and the rise of the far right and so forth. But as we've seen throughout the years, these projects have not taken the left forward. In country after country, they have led to demoralization and division because the politics of these organizations cannot stand up to capitalism, let alone get anywhere close to revolution. They can't even lead to serious advances in the interests of the oppressed and the exploited. And a number of comrades talked about the reasons why, but that's been really driven home. Example after example: Corbyn, Sanders, Podemos, Syriza. And I see there's people today saying, "Oh, we just need another new left broad party," and it's as if that never happened. Amnesia about it, but we all have seen what has happened, and how that enthusiasm can quickly lead to demoralization. The other kind of issue which has come up a lot, I think, is people looking towards mass movements and activism, which is absolutely key and important, obviously, to reviving the left, and any revolutionary organization worth its salt would be throwing themselves into that. But that can become a substitute for trying to build organizations.
I forgot that I took it out of my pocket.
Go on mute, comrade. Because, all the activism and movement work in the world, while really important, can't be a substitute for also building revolutionary organizations that can cohere the courage and heroism of people into stable, ongoing groups that can draw out the lessons from the struggles, their strengths and weaknesses, that can broaden out and unite different struggles that are going on, particularly in the moment where there's so many different groups in society that are under attack in a variety of different ways. So it's really important that we build and convince people of that. And that was one of the big projects for us in Socialist Alternative in the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, which has in the United States and many countries has been the enormous issue that has really politicized so many young people, has totally transformed things for a whole generation of people I know in Australia, like made the question of US imperialism so on the forefront of their minds in the way that it wasn't a few years ago, really. Lots of young people, I don't think, even knew what Palestine was, 5 or 6 years ago in Australia, to be honest. Whereas now it's become such a burning issue. But we've managed to combine throwing ourselves into that, playing a really key role in the national and citywide organizations and the student encampments and some of the trade union work that's gone around Palestine, and use that to also convince a minority of people why they need to be revolutionary Marxists and need to continue fighting the system which has produced the horror of what's going on in Gaza. So yeah, there's some of the diversions and distractions. And in general, there's obviously a long history of revolutionary organizations that have gone off the rails for 1,000,001 different reasons which have come up, both their own internal problems, the broad situation they're in, and so forth. But that can't, I think, allow us to give up on the project of building a revolutionary organization. We have to debate through and think through what is the best kind of organization we want, what are the organizational norms it should have, its politics, its strategies, its way of building, its way of relating to other organizations. But none of that gets around the central question of building the kind of organization we need. Similarly, considering the instability of capitalist politics and the threat of the far right, it's undoubtedly the case, I think, that in coming years, we're going to see all sorts of new, broad left formations arise in response to that kind of situation in different countries. And revolutionaries have to work out how do they concretely relate to those organizations and individuals when they arise. And so many differences in context that kind of shapes that. But even where they do emerge, that again doesn't get rid of the need for independent revolutionary organizations that can bring together the most radical and critical socialists around clear politics for workers' power and revolution. Now, all this can seem like an enormous task, of course, but there's no way around it. And it's absolutely vital. in our own experience in Socialist Alternative, it's a modest experience. We're not a mass revolutionary party, nowhere close, unfortunately. But this weekend, as Bill, I think, mentioned, it's Marxism conference that we're having here in Melbourne, and we've really built it up to be a serious institution. We've got 1,200 people here who have come over the weekend, which is really awesome. Our biggest conference yet. It's also the 30th anniversary of our organization this year, and for those 30 years, we've gone from a group of 40 people to 630. And that, is still way inadequate compared to the crisis of capitalism. But, it's a serious achievement that we've been able to do that over the last couple of decades and build up a whole layer of really amazing cadre activists, of young people are taking a lead in the student work and the trade unions. We've become a much more multiracial, multi-ethnic organization, particularly over the last couple of years, which reflects some of the changes going on in society. The majority of organizations women, which is a real, important thing. It's what you should have considering the majority of the population. And it has a real base amongst young radical people in particular. But that took a lot of hard work. Most of the time it's not that glamorous or that amazing what you're doing. We're just, having little chats with people at cafes, talking through revolutionary politics. For a long time, I was in the Sydney branch of the organization. It was one of the smaller branches. It took us many years to really build it up, get some confidence, some momentum, a clear idea about what we're trying to do. But we all have to start somewhere to try and cohere the people that we know that are out there that want a revolutionary alternative to this system. So best of luck, comrades, with your discussions and everything. A number of us are going to be visiting America in July, as long as your border security let us through the doors. We'll see. But it'll be great to meet you in person and continue these discussions about revolutionary organization around the world.